The impossible job. The dimly lit chamber smelled of tension and power. 12 of the Empire's most influential generals sat around a long, cold metal table. Each one was cloaked in shadows, their faces hidden but their voices sharp. At the head of the table stood General Vrax, a towering figure with an aura of authority that silenced even the bravest officers. "The rebels have gone too far," Vrax growled, slamming a fist onto the table. "Cal Drain is no ordinary leader. He's a symbol, a beacon for the weak. If we don't eliminate him now, the rebellion will spread like wildfire." A low murmur spread across the room. The rebellion had grown bolder in recent months, striking supply lines and liberating colonies. Cal Drain had become a legend, a ghost that the Empire's forces could never catch. "We need specialists," another general suggested. "Someone who can end this quietly and efficiently." Vrax nodded. "Bring in the Void Shades." The room fell silent. The Void Shades were not ordinary assassins. They were legends in their own right. Aliens from the outer reaches of the galaxy, known for their deadly precision and refusal to follow anyone's rules but their own. Many whispered that they were more myth than reality, but the generals knew better. The Void Shades only accepted missions they deemed worthy. They had never failed. Hours later, the chamber door hissed open. 3 figures entered, their movements silent as death. They wore dark, sleek armor that seemed to absorb the light. At the front was Skara, their leader, a tall alien with piercing silver eyes and an air of quiet confidence. Beside her stood 2 of her kind, their faces obscured by smooth helmets. "You summoned us," Skara said, her voice calm but firm. Vrax stood, his hands clasped behind his back. "We have a target for you, Cal Drain, leader of the rebellion. His death will cripple their cause." Skara raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. "And what makes you think we would accept such a task?" Vrax stepped closer, his voice low. "Because we can pay whatever price you name. Credits, resources, power, anything." Skara's silver eyes narrowed as she studied the holographic display of Cal Drain. His image flickered above the table, a man with a determined face and the weight of a galaxy's hopes on his shoulders. After a moment of silence, Skara spoke. "The Void Shades do not kill for money or power. We accept missions that align with our code. Your empire has no understanding of honor or justice." The room erupted in protest. Generals shouted, fists slammed against the table. Vrax raised his hand, silencing them. "Are you refusing us?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Yes," Skara said simply, turning to leave. But she paused at the door, looking over her shoulder. "Cal Drain fights for something greater than himself. Your empire fights only for control. You cannot buy us, and you cannot win." With that, the Void Shades vanished into the shadows, leaving the room in stunned silence. The chamber was in chaos. Vrax's fist slammed into the table again, denting the metal. "They dare insult us. They dare refuse the Empire." One of the younger generals leaned forward, his voice trembling. "What do we do now? Without the Void Shades, our chances of eliminating Drain are slim." Vrax straightened, his eyes cold. "Then we make them regret their decision. Send a message to their homeworld. If they won't serve us, they will suffer the consequences." The generals exchanged uneasy glances. Attacking the Void Shades' homeworld was a dangerous move, but no one dared challenge Vrax's authority. Orders were issued, and the room emptied. Meanwhile, aboard a sleek, black ship drifting through the void of space, Skara sat in silence. Her team surrounded her, their faces serious. One of them, a smaller figure named Kryn, broke the silence. "Do you think they'll retaliate?" Kryn asked. "They will," Skara said, her voice calm. "The Empire knows only one language: violence." Kryn hesitated. "Should we have taken the mission? Cal Drain is just one man. What difference does it make to us?" Skara's silver eyes met Kryn's. "It makes all the difference. If we kill him, we kill hope for millions. The Empire doesn't want him dead because he's dangerous. They want him dead because he inspires others to resist, and we will not be tools of oppression." The team nodded, their resolve strengthening. The Void Shades had survived countless enemies, but they all knew the Empire was unlike any foe they had faced before. Skara leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "The Empire will come for us," she said softly. "But they have no idea what they've started." The Void Shade's refusal was not just an act of defiance. It was the first spark in a battle that would soon engulf the galaxy. The Empire had underestimated them, and the price for their arrogance would be steep. The shadows of the Void Shades moved silently across the galaxy, preparing for the storm to come. The Empire's ultimatum. The starship Dominion's wrath loomed over the orbit of Corvaxis Prime, the Void Shade's hidden sanctuary. Its shadow eclipsed the green and gold hues of the planet below, a silent threat hanging in the void. Inside the command bridge, General Vrax stood with his arms crossed, glaring at the holographic projection of Skara. The Void Shade leader's silver eyes were calm, her expression unreadable. "You've come all this way to deliver another insult?" she asked, her tone sharp but composed. Vrax's voice was cold and measured. "No, Skara. I've come to give you a final chance. Take the job and eliminate Keldrain, or Corvaxis Prime will burn. We have the firepower to wipe your kind from existence." Skara tilted her head, her lips curling into the faintest smile. "You believe we fear extinction." Behind her, the other Void Shades stood silently, their armor gleaming in the dim light. One of them, Kryn, whispered, "They don't understand us, Skara. They think threats will work." Skara raised a hand to silence her team. "We will not kill Keldrain," she said, her voice unwavering. "Your Empire's reign of terror ends with us." Vrax's patience snapped. "Then you've sealed your fate. You and your precious planet will be nothing but ash." A hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving the command bridge in an icy silence. Vrax turned to his officers. "Prepare the bombardment. No survivors." Down on Corvaxis Prime, the Void Shades prepared for war. The lush jungles of their homeworld were alive with activity as their warriors emerged from hidden bunkers and subterranean cities. Skara stood on a high cliff overlooking the preparations, her expression grim but resolute. Kryn approached her, his helmet under one arm. "We can't hold off the Dominion's wrath forever. Their fleet is massive." Skara nodded. "We don't need to hold them off forever. We need to make them hesitate. Every moment they spend trying to crush us is a moment the rebellion grows stronger." She turned to address her people, her voice carrying over the cliffs and valleys. "The Empire believes us weak because we are few. They think their size and power make them invincible, but we are not just warriors. We are shadows, unseen and unstoppable. Today we remind them why they fear the Void Shades." The crowd roared in response, their confidence fueled by Skara's unwavering leadership. As the Empire's fleet descended into Corvaxis Prime's atmosphere, their weapons glowing ominously, the Void Shades launched their counterattack. Silent drones slipped through the fleet's defenses, attaching themselves to key systems. Explosions rippled through the Empire's ships as engines failed and weapons backfired. Vrax watched the chaos unfold from the bridge of the Dominion's wrath. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. "They have no fleet, no army capable of standing against us." An officer replied, his voice trembling. "It's their technology, sir. It's unlike anything we've encountered." Vrax growled, "Double the bombardment. I want that planet in ruins." On the surface, Skara and her team worked quickly, coordinating their forces through neural link systems. Every move was calculated, every strike precise. They weren't trying to win a war. They were buying time. As Kryn returned from a mission, his expression was troubled. "Skara, I intercepted a transmission. The Empire is sending a second fleet. We can't hold out against that." Skara nodded, her face calm despite the dire news. "Then it's time to show them why they should have left us alone." She activated a hidden terminal, revealing a map of the galaxy. Her fingers danced over the controls, sending a signal to a distant location. Crin's eyes widened as he realized what she was doing. "You're calling them." "Skara, are you sure?" She met his gaze, her voice steady. "If the Empire thinks they can erase us, they will learn the cost of underestimating the Void Shades." Back on the Dominion's wrath, Vrax received a disturbing report. "Sir," an officer stammered, "we've detected energy signatures from deep space. Multiple ships. No, a fleet, entering this system." Vrax's eyes narrowed. "What fleet?" The officer swallowed hard. "We don't know, sir, but they're not ours." The bridge fell silent as the stars outside the viewport twisted and shimmered. Massive ships emerged from hyperspace, their designs alien and ancient. Each vessel bore the markings of the Void Shades' allies, a coalition of species long thought extinct. Their weapons glowed with eerie light, aimed directly at the Empire's fleet. Skara's voice crackled through the comms, calm and resolute. "General Vrax, you wanted to see our power. Consider this your final warning. Leave or face the consequences." Vrax clenched his fists, his pride battling against the growing fear in his chest. The room waited for his command, the weight of the moment suffocating. Skara watched from the surface, her eyes on the sky. "The Empire may have its fleets and weapons," she said quietly, "but they've never faced the shadows." The battle had only just begun. The Revel's gambit. The dense jungles of Korvax's Prime hummed with life as Skara paced inside the Void Shades command chamber, her silver eyes fixed on a glowing tactical map. The Empire's fleet still loomed in orbit, temporarily stalled by the sudden arrival of the Void Shades' mysterious allies. But everyone knew the reprieve wouldn't last. "We've bought time," Crane said, his voice low. "But not enough. The Empire will regroup." Skara nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Then we need to strike first, before they realize the full strength of our defenses." Before she could speak further, the chamber's holographic interface flickered to life. An unfamiliar signal cut through their encrypted systems, a direct transmission from the rebellion. A figure appeared in the center of the room, Cal Drain. Cal's image stood tall, his presence commanding even as a projection. His face was weathered, marked by years of struggle and determination. Behind him, faint traces of battle scars hinted at his relentless fight against the Empire. "Skara," Cal began, his tone cautious but steady. "I've heard of your refusal to take the Empire's contract. I'm here to offer you something different." The Void Shades in the room stiffened. Kren muttered under his breath, "What does he think he can offer us?" Skara silenced him with a raised hand. "Speak your proposal, rebel." Cal's expression softened, though his eyes remained sharp. "We share a common enemy. The Empire will not stop with you. They won't stop with me. They seek to control the entire galaxy. Alone, we'll both fall. Together, we have a chance." The room fell silent. The Void Shades were fiercely independent, bound only by their code. An alliance with the rebellion would be unprecedented. Risky. Dangerous. "Why should we trust you?" Skara asked, her voice calm but edged with suspicion. "Your kind is as unpredictable as the Empire." Kale didn't flinch. "Because I have something you need. Intel on the Empire's secret weapon." Cal's hologram gestured, and a detailed schematic appeared in the chamber. It displayed an enormous station, half hidden in a nebula. Lines of glowing energy radiated from its core, pulsing with ominous power. "They call it the Nexus Array," Kale explained. "It's a prototype weapon capable of destroying entire systems with a single pulse of dark energy. The Empire plans to use it as a final solution against us, and against you." The room erupted in murmurs. The Void Shades had faced countless threats, but this was different. The scale of the Nexus Array was staggering, its implications terrifying. Skara's eyes narrowed as she studied the schematic. "And how do you propose we destroy it?" Cal's hologram leaned closer, his expression grave. I have a plan, but it's suicide without your help. We need your expertise, your stealth, and your ability to strike where no one else can." The Void Shades debated long into the night. Some argued against the alliance, citing the rebellion's unpredictability. Others saw the necessity of the partnership. Finally, Skara raised her hand, silencing the room. "We do not align ourselves with causes lightly," she said, her voice echoing through the chamber. "But this is not just a cause. This is survival. The Nexus Array threatens more than just us. It threatens balance. If we don't act, there will be nothing left to protect." She turned back to Cal's hologram. "We will help you, but know this: if you betray us, there will be nowhere in the galaxy you can hide." Cal nodded, his face solemn. "I wouldn't expect anything less." The alliance was sealed with a handshake, Skara's silver eyes meeting Cal's determined gaze through the hologram. The rebels and the Void Shades began coordinating their forces, combining the rebels' guerrilla tactics with the Void Shades' advanced technology. As the plan solidified, Kryn pulled Skara aside. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "We're trusting someone we barely know." Skara's gaze didn't waver. Cal Drain fights for something greater than himself. That makes him dangerous, to the Empire and to anyone who underestimates him. But if he's lying, we'll end him ourselves. Above Corvax's Prime, the Empire's fleet regrouped. General Vrax stood on the bridge of the Dominion's Wrath, staring at the tactical readouts. His officers worked furiously to counter the Void Shade's latest moves, but Vrax's instincts told him something bigger was coming. "What's the status of the Nexus Array?" he barked. "Fully operational, sir," an officer replied. "It's awaiting your orders." Vrax smirked, a cruel glint in his eyes. "Good. Let the rebels and their new friends think they're gaining ground. When the time comes, we'll show them the true power of the Empire." On the surface of Corvax's Prime, the combined forces of the Void Shades and the Rebellion prepared for their most daring mission yet. They would infiltrate the Empire's heart, dismantle the Nexus Array, and cripple the enemy from within. But as the ships prepared for departure, Skara felt a deep unease. She looked at the stars, her silver eyes narrowing. The alliance was fragile, the stakes higher than ever. "The Nexus Array is their weapon," she murmured to herself. "But what else are they hiding?" The shadows whispered no answers. The war was far from over. The trap is set. The rebel fleet glided through the void, their ships cloaked in stealth technology borrowed from the Void Shades. Inside the command deck of the Ecliptica, Cal Drain stood with his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on a holographic display of the Nexus Array. The massive station rotated slowly in the projection, its spindly arms crackling with dark energy. "We're walking into their stronghold," Cal said, his tone grim. "We'll have one shot to take this thing down." Skara, standing beside him, radiated calm confidence. "We don't walk into traps, Cal. We set them." Cal glanced at her, raising an eyebrow. "You think the Empire doesn't expect us?" Skara smirked. "They expect an attack, yes, but not the one we're planning." The Void Shades had worked tirelessly, planting false intelligence throughout the Empire's networks. Their decoys painted a picture of a desperate rebel strike on a remote supply depot, far from the Nexus Array. It was an illusion designed to draw the Empire's forces away from their prize weapon. As the rebel fleet prepared to move, Skara briefed her team. "The Nexus Array isn't just a weapon. It's a fortress. Their strongest defenses are here. If we're going to succeed, we need to strike fast and hard." Kryn, standing at the edge of the room, frowned. "And what about the Empire's Second Fleet? They're not going to sit idly by while we tear apart their superweapon." Skara's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light. "That's why we have a distraction." Hours later, the Empire's command center was in chaos. Reports flooded in of a massive rebel assault on their supply lines. General Vrax, still aboard the Dominion's Wrath, barked orders to his fleet. "Deploy reinforcements to Sector 12, he snapped. "Crush the rebels before they gain any ground." His officers hesitated. Sir, if we redirect forces, the Nexus array will be vulnerable. Vrax's eyes burned with anger. The Nexus array is impenetrable. Let them try. They'll die before they even reach it. In the depths of space, the real rebel fleet approached the Nexus array. Cloaked ships moved silently, guided by the Void Shade's precision. Skara and Kale stood side by side on the Ecliptica, their faces lit by the soft glow of the tactical display. Target their power core, Skara said, her voice steady. Without it, the array is nothing but a floating wreck. Kale nodded. And the defenses. Skara's lips curved into a sly smile. Already handled. The Void Shades had infiltrated the Nexus array days earlier, planting sabotage devices and disabling key systems. As the rebel fleet closed in, explosions erupted across the station, throwing its defenses into disarray. But the Empire was not so easily fooled. As the rebels began their assault, an alarm blared across the Ecliptica. A young officer turned to Kale, panic in her voice. Sir, the Empire's second fleet just jumped into the system. They knew we were coming. Kale's heart sank. How? We covered every angle. Skara's expression darkened. They had help. A traitor. On the Nexus array, the Void Shade sabotage team fought their way to the power core. Kryn led the charge, his movements swift and deadly. But as they reached the final chamber, they were ambushed. Empire soldiers, led by a hooded figure, surrounded them. The hooded figure stepped forward, pulling back their hood to reveal a face Kryn recognized. It was a former rebel commander who had disappeared months ago. You sold us out, Kryn growled, his voice filled with venom. The traitor smirked. Survival requires hard choices. The Empire offered me a future. What did the rebellion ever offer me but death? Kryn clenched his fists, but Skara's voice crackled through his comms. Don't engage. Focus on the mission. Meanwhile, aboard the Dominion's Wrath, Vrax watched the battle unfold with satisfaction. They think they can outsmart us. Let's remind them who controls this galaxy. He turned to his weapons officer. Activate the Nexus array. The officer hesitated. But sir, our forces are still on the station. I said activate it. Vrax barked. Sacrifices must be made. The station began to hum with dark energy as the Nexus array prepared to fire. Its target wasn't just the rebel fleet, it was the entire sector. On the Ecliptica, Kale and Skara realized the gravity of the situation. They're going to use the array, Kale said, his voice laced with urgency. We have to stop them now. Skara nodded. Kryn, you have to disable the core before they fire. Kryn, pinned down by enemy forces, glanced at the sabotage device in his hand. I'll get it done, he said, determination in his voice. But deep down, he knew the odds were against him. As the battle raged, the Void Shades and rebels fought valiantly, their forces pushing deeper into the Nexus array. Explosions rippled across the station as sabotage teams worked tirelessly to dismantle its systems. But the clock was ticking. The Nexus array's power grew, its energy threatening to tear the galaxy apart. Would Kryn reach the core in time? And who was the traitor feeding the Empire their secrets? The answers lay in the heart of the storm, where the line between victory and annihilation grew ever thinner. The void strikes back. The Nexus array pulsed with a sickly glow, its power core surging as the dark energy weapon came online. The surrounding space was alive with chaos. Rebel ships darted between streams of enemy fire, while the Void Shades executed precise, calculated strikes. But the odds were shifting, and every second brought them closer to destruction. On the Ecliptica, Cal Drain stared at the tactical display in grim silence. The Empire's second fleet had formed a defensive perimeter, cutting off their escape routes. The Nexus array's power surge was unmistakable. It was preparing to fire. Skara stood beside him, her silver eyes narrowing. They think we're trapped, she said calmly. Let's remind them that shadows don't follow their rules. Kale glanced at her. Do you have a plan, Or are you just being cryptic? Skara smirked. Both. Inside the Nexus array, Kryn and his sabotage team raced through the twisting corridors of the station, dodging patrols and automated turrets. The air hummed with the station's growing energy, and every step felt heavier, as if the weight of the galaxy bore down on them. Ahead, the power core chamber loomed, its massive doors sealed tight. Kryn gestured to his team. "Cover me while I plant the charges." As his team engaged the Empire's guards, Kryn approached the control panel. His hands moved swiftly, bypassing layers of security. Sweat beaded on his brow. One wrong move, and the entire chamber would explode prematurely. The doors slid open with a hiss, revealing the power core, a swirling vortex of dark energy encased in a reinforced shell. Kryn's heart raced. "Skara," he said into his comms, "I'm in. Starting the override now." The betrayal unveiled. On the Dominion's wrath, General Vrax observed the battle with satisfaction. But his focus shifted as a cloaked figure entered the bridge, a traitor who had been feeding the Empire critical information. "You've done well," Vrax said, a rare smirk on his lips. "Thanks to you, the rebellion and the Void Shades will be nothing more than a memory." The traitor removed their hood, revealing a familiar face, Tessa Lorne, a former high-ranking rebel officer. Her eyes were cold, her voice steady. The rebellion was always a losing fight. The Empire offers order, power, and survival. I chose the winning side. Vrax turned back to the viewport, dismissing her. Your choice is irrelevant now. The Nexus array will erase their fleets, and your role in this will be forgotten. Tessa's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Deep down, she wondered if she had made a grave mistake. The Void's masterstroke. Back on the Ecliptica, Skara's calm demeanor was replaced with focused intensity. "Activate the drones," she commanded. Kale frowned. "Drones? What drones?" Skara smiled faintly. "The ones we hid on their ships weeks ago." In the distance, dozens of tiny black spheres emerged from the shadows of the Empire's fleet. Invisible to sensors, these Voidshade drones latched onto critical systems aboard the Dominion's Wrath and other Empire vessels. Suddenly, the Empire's flagship shuddered. Systems failed, lights flickered, and chaos erupted on the bridge. "What's happening?" Vrax roared. A technician stammered. "It's the Void Shades. They've hacked our systems." Skara's voice crackled through the Empire's comms, calm and mocking. "Did you really think we wouldn't plan for this? The Void Shades always strike from where you least expect." The final push. As the Dominion's Wrath struggled to regain control, the rebel fleet pressed their advantage. Kale led a daring assault, targeting the Empire's remaining ships. Meanwhile, Kryn worked frantically to destabilize the Nexus array's power core. Almost there, Kryn muttered as he connected the final charges. But just as he prepared to detonate, the doors behind him burst open. Tessa Lorne stood there, a blaster in hand. "Kryn," she said, her voice sharp, "step away from the core." Kryn froze, his mind racing. "Tessa, you're the traitor." She nodded, her expression unreadable. "The rebellion is a lost cause. Don't throw your life away." Kryn gritted his teeth. "You don't understand what's at stake. If this array fires, billions will die." Tessa hesitated, her resolve wavering. For a moment, it seemed she might lower her weapon. But before she could decide, Skara's voice cut through Kryn's comms. "Do what you must." Kryn nodded grimly. "Goodbye, Tessa." He slammed the detonator. The Nexus array's collapse. Explosions rippled through the Nexus array, the power core destabilizing in a cascade of energy. Alarms blared as the station began to tear itself apart. Empire ships scrambled to retreat, but the Void Shades drones and the rebel fleet's relentless assault left them cornered. On the Dominion's Wrath, Vrax stared in disbelief as the Nexus array disintegrated. "Impossible," he whispered. "They were supposed to die." On the Ecliptica, Kale watched the station collapse, relief washing over him. "We did it," he said softly. Skara, standing beside him, shook her head. "Not yet. The Empire still has its fleets, and they'll want revenge." Kale met her gaze, his determination renewed. "Then we make sure they never get the chance." The aftermath. As the Rebel and Void Shade forces regrouped, the destroyed Nexus array sent shockwaves, literal and figurative, across the galaxy. The Empire's grip had been loosened, but their wrath was far from spent. In the shadows, the Void Shades planned their next move. For Skara, this was only the beginning. The Empire had learned to fear them, but fear alone wouldn't win the war. As she gazed at the stars, Skara murmured to herself, "The Void doesn't just strike back. It consumes. Sacrifice and betrayal." The shattered remnants of the Nexus array drifted silently in the void, glowing faintly with the remnants of its destructive energy. For the Rebels and the Void Shades, the battle was a victory, but it felt hollow. The Empire's second fleet was regrouping, and their losses had been steep. On board the Ecliptica, the War Council gathered in the dimly lit strategy room. Cal Drain stood at the center, his expression grim as he addressed the gathered leaders. "The Nexus array is gone, but the Empire won't let this go unanswered," Cal said. "We've hurt them, but they'll come back stronger. We need to move fast." Skara leaned against the wall, her silver eyes gleaming in the low light. "There's more at stake than retaliation, Cal. The Nexus array wasn't the Empire's only project." Cal frowned. "What do you mean?" Skara stepped forward, activating a hidden data chip. A new hologram materialized, a sprawling facility buried deep in a starless void, its structure pulsating with energy. "This is the Rift Forge," Skara explained. "It's not just a weapon. It's a gateway." Cal's eyes widened. "A gateway? To what?" Skara's voice dropped, her tone grave. "To another dimension, one the Empire believes holds infinite power. If they succeed, they won't need fleets or armies. They'll control reality itself." The Rift Forge mission. The decision was unanimous. The Rift Forge had to be destroyed. But the mission was dangerous, bordering on suicidal. The facility was protected by the Empire's most advanced defenses, including elite squads loyal only to the Emperor himself. As plans were drawn, tension simmered. The loss of lives in the Nexus battle weighed heavily on the rebels, and trust between the factions was thin. Kale noticed Skara watching him during the meeting, her expression inscrutable. "Something on your mind?" he asked after the others had dispersed. "You trust too easily," Skara said bluntly. "That will get you killed." Kale crossed his arms. "And you don't trust at all. That's a lonely way to fight a war." Skara's gaze hardened. "It's the only way to survive." The Rift Forge assault. The assault began under the cover of a solar storm, which scrambled the Empire's sensors. The Void Shades and Rebel teams approached the Rift Forge in cloaked ships, slipping past the outer defenses. Inside, the facility was a labyrinth of corridors and energy conduits, its air vibrating with an unnatural hum. Kryn led a small sabotage team to the core, where the gateway's energy was being funneled. Skara and Kale stayed with the main strike force, fighting their way through heavily fortified sections. The battles were brutal, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. As they pushed deeper, the hum of the Rift Forge grew louder. Skara could feel it in her bones, a strange, otherworldly pull that made her skin crawl. She glanced at Kull, who seemed similarly affected. "This place isn't just a gateway," she muttered. "It's alive." Kale nodded, his voice low. "Then we need to end it. Fast." The betrayal unfolds. Deep within the Rift Forge, Kryn's team reached the gateway's central chamber. The sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. A swirling vortex of black and violet energy, suspended within a massive containment field. Conduits fed power into the vortex, which pulsed as if it had a heartbeat. As Kryn began planting charges, a familiar voice echoed through the chamber. You should have stayed out of this. Kryn turned sharply, his heart sinking. Tessa Lorne stepped into the light, flanked by Empire soldiers. Her expression was cold, but her eyes held a flicker of regret. "Tessa," Kryn said, his voice strained. "You don't have to do this." "I do," Tessa replied. "The Empire promised me protection, resources, a future." Kryn took a step forward. "And at what cost? Look around you. This thing isn't a future. It's a nightmare." Tessa hesitated, her blaster shaking slightly. For a moment, it seemed she might lower it. But then she steeled herself. "I made my choice." Kryn's voice was steady. "Then so have I." With a flick of his wrist, he activated the detonator. Sacrifice for the greater good. The charges detonated, sending shockwaves through the rift forge. The containment field around the gateway flickered and collapsed, unleashing a surge of energy that tore through the chamber. Kryn and his team were caught in the blast, their final act ensuring the mission's success. On the other side of the facility, Skara felt the ground tremble beneath her feet. She closed her eyes briefly, acknowledging the loss of her comrade. "He did it," she said quietly. Kale placed a hand on her shoulder. "We need to move. The whole facility is coming apart." The rift closes. As the rebels and void shades retreated, the rift forge imploded, its unnatural energy consuming itself. The starless void around the facility shimmered, then fell silent. The Empire's fleet arrived moments too late, finding only debris. On the Ecliptica, Kale and Skara stood together in the observation deck, watching the aftermath. Kale's face was somber. "We stopped them this time, but the cost was high." Skara's voice was soft but firm. "Victory always demands sacrifice." Kryn understood that. Kale turned to her. "And you? How many sacrifices are you willing to make?" Skara's silver eyes glinted. "As many as it takes." But as the stars returned to their quiet vigil, Skara couldn't shake the feeling that the Rift Forge was only the beginning. Somewhere, in the darkness, the Empire was already preparing its next move. The Empire falls. The ruins of the Rift Forge drifted silently in the void, its destruction a testament to the bravery of the Void Shades and the rebellion. But the war was far from over. The Empire's fleets were regrouping, their resolve unshaken, and their wrath focused squarely on the rebels and their shadowy allies. On the Ecliptica, Caldrain paced the bridge, his mind racing. Reports of the Empire's movements flooded in. Their largest fleet was assembling near the core worlds, preparing for a final, devastating strike. "They're calling it Operation Dominion," Kale said, addressing the gathered leaders of the rebellion and the Void Shades. "If they succeed, they'll wipe out every free colony in the galaxy." Skara leaned against the wall, her expression unreadable. "Then we don't let them succeed." Kale turned to her, frustration flickering in his eyes. "We've lost too many, Skara. The Rift Forge mission cost us lives we can't replace. What makes you think we can take on their entire fleet?" Skara's silver eyes met his. "Because we've already proven we can do the impossible, a plan of desperation." The Void Shades and rebels devised a plan that was as daring as it was dangerous. They would strike at the heart of the Empire itself, Imperial Command, the sprawling orbital station that served as the nerve center for their fleets. Skara outlined the details. Imperial Command is heavily fortified, but its strength is also its weakness. If we disable their central command hub, their fleets will be thrown into chaos. They won't be able to coordinate an attack. Kale frowned. "And how do you propose we get past their defenses?" "They'll see us coming." Skara smiled faintly. "That's the beauty of it. They won't be looking for us. They'll be looking for something much bigger." The Void Shades had prepared a decoy fleet, a collection of automated ships rigged with explosive payloads. While the decoys drew the Empire's attention, a small strike team would infiltrate Imperial Command. Kale nodded slowly, a flicker of hope returning to his eyes. "It's risky, but it could work." The final assault. The decoy fleet emerged from hyperspace near Imperial Command, its sheer size and firepower drawing immediate attention. Alarms blared across the Empire's flagship, the Eternal Dominion, as officers scrambled to respond. General Vrax stood on the bridge, his expression cold and calculating. "Fools," he muttered. "They think they can take us head-on. Deploy the fleet. Wipe them out." As the Empire's ships swarmed the decoys, the real strike team slipped through the chaos. Skara led the Void Shades and a select group of rebels aboard a cloaked ship, weaving through the defenses with surgical precision. Inside Imperial Command, the air was thick with tension. The strike team moved silently, taking out guards and disabling systems as they advanced toward the command hub. Skara's movements were fluid and precise, her years of training evident in every step. But the Empire was prepared. A squad of elite soldiers ambushed the team, cutting off their path. Blaster fire lit up the corridors as the strike team fought desperately to break through. A sacrifice for victory. As the battle raged, Skara noticed a critical vulnerability in the command hub's design, a fail-safe that could disable the station's defenses but required manual activation. It was a one-way trip. Kryn's absence weighed heavily on her mind as she made her decision. Turning to Kale, she spoke quickly. "You need to lead the team out. I'll handle the failsafe." Cal's eyes widened. "No. We've lost too many already. We'll find another way." "There isn't another way," Skara said firmly. "You have a galaxy to save, Hale. Don't waste it arguing with me." Before he could protest further, she moved, her speed and determination leaving no room for debate. She slipped past the fighting, her presence a shadow among the chaos. The fall of Imperial Command. As Skara reached the failsafe, alarms blared louder, signaling the Empire's fleet regrouping. She worked quickly, bypassing the system's security protocols. Her hands moved with practiced precision, her thoughts calm despite the storm around her. Kale and the others fought their way to the extraction point, their retreat under heavy fire. The rebels were weary, their numbers dwindling, but Kal's resolve burned brighter than ever. Aboard the Eternal Dominion, General Vrax watched in horror as Imperial Command systems began to fail. Lights flickered, weapons powered down, and communications were severed. The station was crippled, and with it, the Empire's ability to coordinate its fleets. Skara's voice crackled through Kal's comms one last time. "The galaxy's free now, Kale. Make sure it stays that way." And then the failsafe activated, sending a surge of energy through the station. Imperial Command erupted in a cascade of explosions, its destruction visible from every corner of the system. A new dawn. The Empire's fleets fell into disarray, their ships scattering as rebel forces pressed their advantage. The loss of Imperial Command was a blow they could not recover from. Across the galaxy, oppressed colonies rose up, inspired by the rebellion's victory. On the Ecliptica, Kale stood alone, staring out at the stars. Skara's absence was a heavy weight, but her sacrifice had given the galaxy a chance to rebuild. A young officer approached him. "Sir, transmissions are coming in from the outer colonies. They're declaring independence." Kale nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. She was right. The void isn't just a shadow. It's hope. Epilogue. In the distant reaches of space, a faint signal flickered, a coded transmission that only the Void Shades would recognize. Skara's voice echoed faintly through the void. "The fight isn't over. The true enemy is still out there." The galaxy's hardest battles had been won, but the shadows hinted at greater challenges to come. For now, though, the stars burned brighter, free from the Empire's iron grip.